So welcome to the Beaches Watch Community Virtual Meeting. We're glad you could join us and look forward to an informative session. Here are some instructions to make your participation go smoothly. All audio and video for participant use will automatically be muted. If you are connected through a computer or mobile device utilizing the Zoom app, you may use the chat box to enter any questions or comments at any time. To access the chat box, either hover your mouse at the bottom of the Zoom meeting screen, or if you have touch screen capabilities, simply touch the bottom of the Zoom meeting screen and the chat icon will appear. For anyone dialing in via phone, the chat feature will not be accessible. You will only have the ability to listen during the meeting. We will monitor the chat box for Q&A following the presentation. If you have any questions or technical issues, please text us at 904-333-5101. As always, your patience and understanding are most appreciated should we have any technical issues, and thank you for participating and for your support. We'll begin the meeting shortly. Good evening and welcome to our February Beaches Watch meeting. I'm Maria Mark, President of Beaches Watch and your host for tonight's meeting. Before we get to our featured speaker, I have just a few announcements to make. So as always, our Beaches Watch meetings are videoed, and you will be able to see it tomorrow on our YouTube channel, Beaches Watch 2012. We're always looking to grow our membership, so it's time to either renew or join your membership for 2022. $15 for individual, $20 for family, and $5 for student. Your membership is valid January through December, and you may join or renew your membership or make a donation online at our website at beacheswatch.com. At this time, I'd like to recognize our elected officials. And it looks like first I want to recognize Sandy Golding, who is our city councilwoman for the city of Jacksonville Beach. We have Mayor Ellen Glasser from the city of Atlantic Beach. Let's see, who else do we have? I got started a little late, so I wasn't able to pull everybody down here. Let's see. Is anyone else on the email right now? I don't see any other elected officials. Sometimes we'll have some come in late, a little later. So if we do, we will try and recognize them during the meeting. Let's see, hold on 1 second. Okay. We've now started our 2022 legislative session. It started January the 11th and will run through March the 11th. Our speaker tonight is Scott Dudley, who will be giving us the good, the bad, the ugly of what is being proposed during this session. And so we'll hear from him later. As a reminder, the marathon 26.2 with Donna, the 15th annual national marathon to finish breast cancer, will be this weekend, February 4th through the 6th. For race course information, closings, timing, that sort of thing, please visit breastcancermarathon.com. This coming Wednesday, February 9th at noon, Atlantic Beach will host the Lunch and Learn, and the topic will be Blue Zones. This will be held in the Atlantic Beach Commission Chamber and hosted by the City of Atlantic Beach and the Mayor's Council on Health and Wellbeing. City meeting date changes due to the President's Day holiday will be Jax Beach. They will hold their meeting on Wednesday, February 23rd at 6 p.m. Also due to the Jacksonville special election on February 22nd. Neptune Beach, they will move their meeting to Tuesday, February 26th at 6 p.m. Let's see, other announcements. Okay, so Jacksonville Beach will be hosting their Urban Trails Master Plan meetings, their public meetings. There's several meeting dates being planned, February 9th, February 23rd, and March 9th. All meetings will be held via Zoom from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And you can find the link on our website. The Jacksonville special election early voting will begin February 12th and will run through February 20th. The location will be at our Beaches Branch Library from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And of course, election day is February 22nd. You can learn more about the Jacksonville special election candidates on our website and read their responses to the written questionnaire that we sent to them, which addresses issues that are important to our Beaches voters. And on the ticket is our Nick Howland and Tracy Polson. Finally, save the date, Wednesday, March 2nd at 7 p.m. We're going to have an update on our Duvall County schools, and our speakers will be our school board representative, Elizabeth Anderson, as well as our Duvall School Superintendent, Dr. Diana Green. This meeting will also be held virtual, so mark your calendars, and we'll get our latest update on what's going on with our schools and COVID and everything else at this point. So now, without further ado, we will have our 2022 legislative session and bills you need to know about. Our speaker is Scott Dudley. He is the Director of Field Advocacy from the Florida League of Cities. Welcome, Scott, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. And unmute.
I knew I was going to do that. I kept saying, make sure you unmute, but
everybody does that, so don't feel bad.
Right, so thank you very much for having me. As you know, I've had a long relationship with Beaches Watch. I come over and address you all a number of times, met a number of you, and I really love what you all do. I wish there was a whole bunch more of you around the state, folks like you. We could probably get a lot more done in terms of having good input into having the legislature know that people are paying attention, having just generally more aware citizens. So thank you for everything that you all do. I want to show you a little video real quick about a program that the League of Cities is creating called Local Voices United. It's an effort to try to get citizen groups more engaged in the legislative process. And I'm going to talk to you real briefly about what that's about. And then I'm going to talk specifically about some individual pieces of legislation. And so let me go ahead and start that now. And I think we practice on this, and I hope I can remember. Boom. All right. Can you see it?
Yep, we can see it.
It's a problem for every Floridian. And to fix it, we must work.
Oops, let me start over here. Sorry.
Corridors of power are stalked by lobbyists, lawyers, and special interests. But there's one important voice that's missing. Yours. That's why we started Local Voices United, a nonpartisan network of Republicans, Democrats, and independents working together to protect local decision-making for every community in the Sunshine State. Join us, and we'll give you clear, simple, and straightforward information about threats to local decision-making and how to fight them. Learn more at localvoicesunited.com.
So thanks for indulging me with that. I just wanted to show you that because I wanted to let you know that. So the League of Cities, we're a lobbying organization. We do a lot more. We do ethics training for municipal officials. We handle pensions for cities. We do a bunch of different stuff, but our core mission is lobbying. And it's lobbying to protect home rule. And that's what that little video is about, is trying to get more folks to get involved. The legislature's basically been preempting local governments really over the last several years, last 10 years, there's been 92 different preemptions of decision making. And the legislature likes to look at that issue as, oh, well, we're upset because we're stripping, because local governments don't like the authority being taken away from them. But that's not how we view it here at the League of Cities. We view it as every time they preempt something, every time they're doing something like that, they're stripping your voice away. They're taking away the ability for you to have a say in what's going on in your own community, to talk about the issues, whether it's vacation rentals, whether it's placement of cell phone towers, whatever it is, they're stripping you of your voice on those really, really important issues. And they're putting a one size fits all solution into state statute. And they're basically bypassing you, the citizens, to have a say in what's going on in your neighborhoods. And we think that's wrong. And so we're trying to build a grassroots network across the state of active citizens like yourself, former elected officials, currently elected officials, just trying to really grow our army so that the legislature is going to have to continue to pay attention to what we're doing. They started to tune out a lot of local elected officials because they just view us as another interest group. But as I said, we don't view ourselves that way. Yes, we represent the League of Cities, all the cities in the state, but we believe cities are comprised of the businesses, the neighborhoods, the citizen groups that are in those communities. And therefore, every time they take the voice away from the city, they're really taking away your voice. And so I'd love for you to get involved in the Local Voices United effort. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that through this little program, but mostly I want to talk to you. Let me get there. Start slideshow, go there, start from beginning. Oops, I got a screen share. Am I there? Can you see it okay?
Not yet, Scott.
Not
All
yet.
we're seeing is the video screen.
All
Yeah.
right, let me get,
Say, exit out of the video, maybe.
yep, sorry. I was afraid. Let me stop share for a second.
Okay. And now,
Exit out.
now try and share your PowerPoint. Or if Sandy can help, she can maybe share the PowerPoint.
Yep. I've got this one here. I think we can crank the, let me try this here. Sorry about that.
Hmm.
You'd think as many
That's fine.
times I've done this, I remember, but I
It's
just
share screen.
share screen. Thank you. Which means I have to go back to the Zoom. Share screen there. Share. We
You're
good?
natural. Look at that. Now put it on beginning and then you're good. Top
From the
left.
beginning.
That's
From the
it.
beginning.
You're a natural, Scott.
All right. So
There you go.
I'm gonna kind of just skip through this. So really what the League of Cities is fighting about is you having a say. It's local rule, it's home rule, it's grassroots localism, it's local decision making, it's a whole bunch of different things. The concept is really simple. The community is governed best by those who live in it. That's you, that's your local elected officials, not some guy or some woman in Tallahassee who's never stepped foot in your city and trying to tell you what's best for you and the rest of your city. It's not a new concept. It's been around since ancient Roman times. 50 years ago, the citizens of the state put into the state constitution something called home rule. That's the ability of local governments to make decisions about the things that affect them. You can see there's a poll here. 72% of folks agree that their local city government is more connected to their needs and better reflect local values than the state government. I want you to tell me what other issue you can find 72% of people agree on. There's not going to be a whole lot of them. So, why is local decision making better? But more competition. Cities are competing against each other for jobs, for citizens to come live there, to provide better services. They're more responsive. When you can run into your local elected officials at the grocery store, a lot of you probably couldn't pick your state senator or your member of Congress out of a lineup. Some of them may belong in a lineup. Fewer mistakes, fewer stakes, lower stakes. You all your local governments meet regularly. The legislature meets once a year. If they screw something up, they've got to wait for a whole year in order to come back and fix it. That's not what happens at the local level. Participation in democracy, much easier to talk to your local elected officials. You see them in the grocery store, at the local ball field. They're there for you. Less ideological, more decentralized. So you get it. It's really where things are happening. So local governments deal with the issues that are most important and most relevant to you. Did your garbage get picked up? Did your streetlights come on? Did your faucet have running water? Did the stormwater go down the drain? Or your streets flooded? Those are the things that local governments are dealing with, and that your local that you all are most interested in. Senator Pizzo has what he calls the bullseye theory. The place closest to your home and your heart is the most important. So 92 preemptions since 2010. That's bad. That's taken away the checks and balances. It's taken away your voice. Cell phone towers and telecom infrastructure, short-term rentals, local tree trimming regulations, billboards, commercial signage, plastic bags. They've overturned local elections, home-based business regulations. Just a whole lot that they're meddling in. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of really important issues that are up this session. Going to talk about two good ones first, that they're giving us back some local authority. It's the ability to regulate smoking in public places. Senate Bill 224 and House Bill 105 would empower local communities to decide for themselves whether smoking or not is appropriate for public places like parks, beaches, etc. The bills are being heard. They're moving their way through the process. Tomorrow, one of them, the House bill, will be heard. Next Monday, the Senate bill will be heard. Those are the last committees for both of them. Looks like these things are on a good track for moving forward. If you know anybody, and I can send to y'all the links for those committee chairs and the members, so that if you want to weigh in on that, you can do that. You can also do it by going to Local Voices United, or by texting Local Voices to 50457, just the words Local Voices to the number 50457. That will put you in our network. We'll send you out legislative alerts, things like that on these type of issues. Another two bills I want to talk to you about. A couple of years ago, the legislature preempted local governments. They basically said that the local governments have no authority on tree trimming ordinances, that all somebody had to do is get a letter from an arborist who largely worked for tree trimming companies to say that a tree was potentially dangerous. Well, guess what? We live in Florida. Every tree is in fact potentially dangerous. We've been pushing hard about trying to change that standard where it poses an unacceptable risk. And the definition of that is much more, it's a tighter definition. It means that they have to deal with it in a way that a National Arborist Association best management practices. Again, both bills are moving. We're wanting some you all to weigh in on that. I'll tell you quickly about, I know that vacation rentals is an important issue for a lot of folks around the state. The Senate bill, we were neutral on it till yesterday. We're trying to figure out where we are. Now they added a cap registration so that the bill allows a local registration program. The one good thing it does is allow a local registration program for vacation rentals. In the House bill, no fee is allowed if the registration program is established after the effective date of the bill, but it grandfathers existing fees. In the Senate bill, they cap registration at $50, whether you were in existence before or not. But strangely enough, they authorize up to 75 simultaneous. So if I own 75 different pieces of property, I can submit an application for up to those 75 registration for the local program, but they cap the fee at $100 total. That's not $100 per piece of property. It's $100 total. We think that the fees ought to reflect the costs, that we ought to not be subsidizing local governments ought to not, and citizens ought to not be subsidizing VRBO or Airbnb or some other big corporation. The bills give Division of Hotel and Restaurants and DPPR limited enforcement mechanism. The problem for that is DPPR is completely overwhelmed as it is. They're already nationally ranked very low in terms of their ability to get the job done that they already need to. And now they're going to put more responsibility on them for handling something that we think should be handled by local citizens. Both bills require vacation rentals, one of the good things, to designate and maintain a responsible party who can respond to complaints and other immediate problems. You'd have to list a phone number, a contact information for somebody to be able to call and say, hey, there's a party going on at XYZ residence. So those are some of the big bills they're watching. I want to remind you that if you're not weighing in with your local official, you're letting them free to do whatever it is they choose to do. If they don't hear from you on vacation rentals, on signage, on smoking in the parks, whatever it is, they're going to do, you giving them free reign to do, you have given them permission to vote whatever way they want. So the worst thing you can hear as a lobbyist is that I'm not hearing about this issue from anybody at home. So we're trying to make sure that they now are going to hear about these issues from their citizens back at home. Again, take action, go to our Facebook page, text local voices to 50457, get involved. And with that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, that was sweet, down and dirty. Thanks, guys. So the Local Voices United, is that something that the Florida League of Cities has had as far as organized it for a while, or what's been the participation for that?
So it's about a year old. So as you know, I was legislative director here at the league for the last 10 years. And I kept saying that we needed to get more citizens involved because the legislature wasn't really, they were ignoring the wishes of elected officials. And my boss said, you know what? I think you're right. We do need to get more citizens involved. Why don't you head up that program? Because I've done Grassroots before. I did it for Kodak and Fuji for 10 years before I came here. And so they decided that I'm the man for the job. And so it is a new program trying to just educate this. If you text that local voice to 50457, you'll see that we have talk sheets on all the important issues, that we have letters that you can just hit a send button to your legislator. We have the committees listed. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for you all to be able to get engaged. I see in the chat that somebody wants me to talk about the bills that require city business impact study and claims for business damages. That's Senate Bill 620 and Senate Bill, let me give the numbers here. I've got them, 620 and 280, I think they are. And let me just tell you that the 280 is the bill that requires the impact study. I will tell you the league is now in a position of the League of Cities. We have really scaled those bills back in a way as they originally came out. It was any business, didn't even have to be located in the state of Florida, didn't have to be in business for a certain amount of time. It gave carte blanche. It was one-way attorney's fees. We have narrowed the scope of those bills in such a way that we are now in the position of actually supporting Senate Bill 280. We think we've scaled them back. I'm not telling you that they're great bills. I'm telling you that those bills were going to pass. Senate Bill 280 is a Senate president's priority. And we're smart enough to know that we negotiated. We got about 80% of the things that we wanted in that legislation in Senate Bill 280. And the deal that we had was if we come along as far as you want us to, you're going to have to stand down your opposition. And so that's what we did. Senate Bill 620 that allows for the business damages at Senate Bill 620. We also have mitigated that substantially. It requires the bill was changed again for prevailing party attorneys fees. was on the business profits. It would have allowed for business damages if an ordinance impacted 15% of a business's profits. We changed it. We've excluded emergency orders. We've excluded zoning. We've excluded land use decisions. We've excluded a whole bunch of things. Again, we're not saying that we're in love with that bill. That's why we're neutral on the bill, but they've taken about 60% of what we wanted. You can't negotiate and get 60% of what you want and then stand up and say, hey, you still ought to vote against the bill. We are encouraging individuals that recognize that there are still some problems with the bill, noise ordinances, some of the other things that aren't addressed in this, in our fix. We encourage you to weigh in and let your legislators know that you're also paying attention. Again, our webpage, the leagues, the Local Voices United, as well as the League of Cities webpage, has a complete summary of those bills. We think we've done a really good job of trying to scale those back, but we recognize that not everybody's going to love them. And so we encourage you that if you still aren't in love with it, that you get to weigh in, and we've helped you out with in terms of giving you a very comprehensive summary of what those bills do and the impact of those.
Can you just give us just a Reader's Digest version of the impetus of this bill? I mean, what brought this bill about?
So ostensibly, so over the last, you saw the slide I had before that there's been 92 exemptions that have passed since 2010. And even the legislature is tired of preempting us. I mean, they're not going to stop doing it, but they're tired of spending so much air every session. There's so much energy that they spend on preemption bills. So they came up with this idea of basically using the what's called the Burt Harris legislation. And some of you may be familiar with that. Burt Harris is basically if a ordinance or a law impacts a business or an entity that it's considered a taking, you've somehow limited the use of their private property, that you're allowed to sue for damages. Well, they use that as essentially the basis for this business damages, saying if an ordinance is passed that affects your profits by 15%, that you ought to be entitled to damages. So they use that as the impetus. The ostensibly it's to keep the legislature to have local governments be paying more attention to, which we're already doing. So it's kind of there. We're not waking up in the middle of the night going, oh, let's regulate so-and-so. But the legislature views it as a way to make us take a deep breath, pause, really look at all the possible outcomes of a local ordinance. And before we adopt it, that we recognize that we may get sued for damages. And so we're supposed to pump the brake. The way it was originally crafted is even the economic impact statement, if they didn't like the numbers in it, they could use that as a way to sue us for stopping the ordinance. We've changed that also, that no longer the economic impact, as long as we do an economic, we can say in the economic impact statement, it's indeterminate, we don't know. That would be a reasonable economic if we really take measures to try to do it. So the object is that the legislature is looking, they're tired of all the preemption bills too. And our answer to them is, well, if you're tired of them, don't file them.
Right.
Quit taking them up. But that's not how they came up with that. The solution they had was that they want to make it extraordinarily difficult for us to pass certain ordinances that affect the business community. And so they're going to make us pause and take measure before we do that.
And who's the major sponsors of this from Senate?
Well, so it's the Senate president and and
Okay.
the next Senate president. So it's President Wilton Simpson is responsible for the business damages one, and
Okay.
incoming President Senator Pasadomo from Naples area is responsible for the economic impact statement. So when you got the current Senate president, and the next Senate president, that's why we negotiated so hard on these, trying to get them in a form that was at least not, they're chopping off our hand instead of our arm, basically.
Right.
Sorry for the graphic metaphor there.
No, it's probably pretty close. So another question is, are there any cities in the state who may want to have gun restrictive laws or better sales laws, et cetera? Or does the state keep cities from doing this?
As far as gun laws, we are completely preempted with respect to gun laws, except for we're still allowed to have ordinances that you can't shoot in city parks, things like that, and that comply with noise ordinances and dangerous discharge, but they're essentially mirroring state law. Several years ago, this is one of those things I put in that slide about big mistakes, lower stakes, bigger mistakes, that when the legislature preempted us completely on gun laws, within a couple of years, they had to come back and say, all right, we went too far. We're going to give you some authority back, because people were literally building gun ranges in their backyard. And our local noise ordinances, because it dealt with guns, were void because they said we had no say over guns. So they came back and said, all right, well, we didn't mean to go that far, but it took them 2 sessions to do it. So 2 years of having to deal with that problem, which is exactly what we talk about with home rule, is we're way more receptive. We're way more adaptable. We're way more flexible. So we are extremely limited in what we can do with respect to guns.
So here's a question about going back to vacation rentals. It says, please explain that the vacation rental bills also don't allow cities to place occupancy limits and require parking and waste management for vacation rentals. The parking requirements and occupancy are so important because these vacation rentals are causing problems in neighborhoods with large parties and lots of cars parking in the neighborhoods, etc.
So what it is that you are allowed to adopt, I'm going to read you the language from the staff analysis. So just because I think it's the best, it says it best. You're not allowed to adopt any ordinance. You can adopt ordinances, but you're not allowed to apply them strictly to vacation rentals. So if you're going to have an ordinance relating to parking in neighborhoods, it can't be restrictive to just vacation rentals. It has to be that no house can have more than 6 cars in it at any given time. No house can have more than 20 people in it for occupancy. You have to apply them to all. You cannot specifically be geared towards vacation rentals. Same for you, if you're going to talk about having an ordinance dealing with trash, it can't be specifically that vacation rentals aren't allowed to have X amount of trash. You have to apply it to all residences equally. So you can't single out vacation rentals.
Well, so, I mean, we do VRBOs a lot, and it seems to me that it's the owner or the property management company that puts I guess you can say restrictions, but, you know, the very rules of the occupancy. And everyone that we've ever, stayed in said, you can't have this party, you can't have like loud parties, you can't do this, you have to be just the people who are on the, who's renting it, that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's still something that could spill over to if we were to have VRBOs within our cities, right?
So, yeah, so I gave you the really short version. So it's way complicated. It's super complex in that in 2011, the legislature came in and preempted everyone except for those cities that already had ordinances. They allowed those cities to maintain their ordinances. Then in 2014, they came back and they said, well, we went a little too far with the preemption. We're going to allow you to have a little bit more leeway, but not full leeway. So now they're coming back and they, for instance, they said, we're not going to allow you to have a registration program. Well, now this law that is being discussed will actually allow you to have a registration program, except for you can't charge more than $50 for your registration program unless it was already in place in the House bill, but in the Senate bill, you can't charge more than $50 regardless of when it was put in place. So there's a bunch of layers to it and a bunch of complexities. And again, it goes back to the one size fits all approach isn't appropriate. It's exactly why you all should be making decisions that fit your local needs and what your citizens want. So trying to fit in all these grandfathers and all this kind of stuff is just,
right.
That some cities have taken the lead and they're trying to make a one size fits all, and there is no one size fits all.
Right. Okay.
So I gave a really
Valid.
basic answer, but it's way more complicated. And I
Yeah.
urge you to go to the league's website and read the nuances of it, because it's really, really important to if you go to FloridaLeagueOfCities.com or even Local Voices United, you can link to the bill summaries and things like that.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. So we have one viewer who wants to know if there's any hope of getting rid of the Rodman Dam. That's in your
So
purview.
not a municipal issue. We focus on the functions and operations of the municipality. And so that's not an issue that we have even opinion on. So
Right. Okay.
I fish there occasionally, but I don't have any opinion on it.
Okay. What about on redistricting and map drawing? Do you guys have any?
We're following it only to the degree that we're trying to make sure that they comport with the fair districting legislation, which talked about keeping municipalities essentially intact, not cutting them up, carving them up into 4 different, and basically trying to make sure that neighborhoods are adequately represented, that you're not drawing a line down the middle of the neighborhood and one side of the street has one congressperson and the other side of the street has another congressperson. In some instances, they're going to have to do that, but trying to make it contiguous and fair in every way that they can.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question about election laws. Supporting free and secure elections and separation of church and state, i.e. giving funding to religious entities. And what if a city wanted to defy the new state limited abortion laws?
So in the legislature a few years ago, if a city defies a state law, I know they did it with gun laws, they're probably going to do it they did it with immigration law. It's become one of their new tools in their toolkit, is that they put penalties, very stiff penalties for any elected municipal official or county official who, if a city or county adopts any type of ordinance that's not in compliance with state law, then they are on the hook, personally liable. And so my guess is that will have a very chilling effect in terms of any city taking any measure that is not in compliance with state law.
Any change on financial disclosure reporting for local officials and board members?
Great question. And yes, they're attempting to make the local elected officials comply with the same standards that they have for the state legislature. It's a Form 6 instead of a Form 1, and I may have the numbers wrong, but the essence of it is that 2 different forms are used. We've expressed a lot of concern about that. We think that the level of detail running they're dealing with statewide policy and a multi-billion-dollar budget where cities aren't doing that. We are trying to see if we can figure out a way to carve out whether it's a population threshold or a budget threshold for having to fill out those Form 6. We think that it will very much serve as a disincentive for individuals wanting to serve at the local. Some cities, they don't even get paid. They're literally volunteers, and they're going to force them to fill out this comprehensive that you need essentially an accountant to fill out. And these people are trying to just do a public service. And we just don't think that's appropriate for a city of, 500 people or 2,000 people and their budgets, $1.2 million or something. We don't think that's an appropriate measure. And so we are working to try to amend that bill in a way that makes it reasonable and fair.
Okay. I guess this is more of a statement than a question, but it says, please encourage citizens who have firsthand experience with vacation rentals and the problems they bring their neighborhoods. They need to contact the legislators and let them know about the problems they are causing. It's so important for legislators to hear how these bills are impacting their constituents.
And amen to that. And that's what we've encouraged that for sure. And that's part of this citizen outreach effort, is that, we're going over to the Capitol and saying, oh, there's problems. And they're like, well, I'm not hearing about them from citizens. So what we're asking citizens to do, whether it's the home-based business bill that they passed last year, where they're going to allow mechanic shops in neighborhoods or massage parlors in neighborhoods or any other type of business in a neighborhood, take pictures, if the cell phone tower ends up in the front of your front yard on your right of way, take a picture, make sure you're documenting it, make sure the legislators know that it's not just anecdotal like they like to do and say, oh, well, we heard that there's a problem, so we're going to quote fix it. We're trying to document as much as we can. And so if you've got pictures like that, or you've got any type of documentation, please, please, please share it with us. We want those things. We're armed with knowledge is way better for us to go over and have it and make a real meaningful impact.
And a picture says 1,000 words, right?
At least.
Just getting back to the redistricting map drawing, is it so obviously partisan that it's likely to end up in courts or end up in the courts?
I think it will, and I would just like to say at the front end that when so obviously so partisan. So this is probably a longer answer than you want, but in terms of partisanship is in the eyes of the beholder, obviously, in many instances. In some instances, it is obviously partisan. But I will say that the U.S. Supreme Court, in a number of rulings over the last few years, has basically said that it's got to be really blatantly, extremely bad for the U.S. Supreme Court to take a look at it. And they're going to largely leave it to the state courts. And so we've got a pretty conservative state Supreme Court, and that's basically where any type of redistricting will end up. It probably won't. Most of these, the Supreme Court is not taking on a lot of redistricting type of cases. It would have to be like blatantly like, hey, we're doing this so that we can exclude these people from voting type of thing. I mean, it would have to be really blatant. And so there's been an erosion of that at the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court level. So the state Supreme Court, which is largely it's a pretty conservative body. I know that they recently, Governor DeSantis unveiled a map. I saw today the Supreme Court said, tell us why we should take up your map, Governor, when the legislature is in charge of drawing the maps. So prove to us why you have a say in this. So they're at least seeming to be positioning themselves for wanting to have, it done fairly and equitably, and we'll see.
And I think this may be the final question. Do you have thoughts on the new Senate bill introduced by Travis Hudson related to new election laws such as election police force, etc.?
One of in a couple of the things we do in that there's an effort. We think that we don't have any knowledge of this, but it seems like a good vehicle for it. So they've done in that bill. They've said one of the provisions is no more what they call jungle primaries, which are basically where Democrats, Republicans, it's the ranked order voting, which the top two vote getters go on to the next election for the runoff. Mm-hmm. And you could have two Democrats in a Republican area that just happen to get the most votes. And so they're saying that cities can no longer do that ranked voting type. They're going to prohibit that. And the other thing is they're trying to make school board elections, and there was an effort in the past for municipal elections to be partisan. And one of the things that cities are really proud about is that we're not partisan. There's not a Democratic way or Republican way to make sure that the electricity gets turned on or that the streets are paved, or, I mean, you've served, you understand, that yes, there's fighting at the local level, but for the most part, that's where the rubber meets the road and the business is getting done. And we think it'd be a really bad idea to make those races partisan. So that's our worldview on that.
Viewer says, are there federal laws that can fine these state legislators for defying federal laws? Isn't this the same as a state telling cities how to act, including separation of church and state, back to funding issues, etc.? I guess things could go to the Supreme Court.
There are, but the powers that are reserved to the state, we are a democratic republic with each state having a lot of power. It was meant that way for a decentralized federal government, and the federal government is very much the mantra of the Florida legislature is the federal government should only do that which has been explicitly given the powers to do, where they shouldn't be. And frankly, I mean, from a city standpoint, we kind of would agree if you take it to the next level. We think the state should only be doing those things that the state should be doing and not doing those things that local government should be doing. And so it's interesting to see how quick the state legislature is to preempt and how much they hate being preempted by the federal government, but boy, they have no qualms about, where they say it all runs downhill, and
Right.
we're at the bottom of that hill when it comes to that. So
Right, exactly. And then let's see, question, can you talk about legislation that has been introduced about building inspections after the Surfside condo collapse?
yeah, there is some legislation moving. There'll probably be something that passes. It's going to give some additional authority in terms of where the location of the condo is, whether it's within 3 miles of the shoreline or not for salt water, additional earlier inspections, more frequent inspections, changes in terms of the amount of reserves, perhaps that's going to be one. I think that we're not going to know what that final bill looks like till the final day, because the House and Senate have pretty significant differences in the way that they're approaching it. I do know there is a number of bills that are dealing with that particular issue and different worldviews on the way it should be resolved. And I think when it's all said and done, they're going to make some changes to it and make it a little more stringent. What that all looks like, I don't know. I think the timeline will be there'll be a glide path to help condo associations and others start to build the reserves that they need. It won't be something that like, hey, tomorrow you're going to have triple your reserves or anything like that, because they're trying to establish a glide path.
Right, but wasn't there, or isn't there a trust fund that was specifically set up that was supposed to hold the HOA, the assessments and that sort of thing, and the dues, that we thought the trust fund was there to do these inspections and to make sure, that
it's the inspections was never really the big cost factor. It was some actually what we're finding, if you read the report, there were a number that were of condo associations and others that were scared to have the report the inspections even done, because once they were done, they became liable for getting that stuff fixed. And so so they were just kind of non-compliance, or kind of like, oh, let's kick the can down the road. And they're going to try to make sure that no more kicking in the can, but also give a glide path for those associations so that they're not all of a sudden have to do an inspection tomorrow that's going to cost them $8 million and they have $1 million in their reserves, and everyone's going to get hit with a $500,000 fee.
well, right, but where was that money spent then, if it wasn't held in reserves for the those particular things that I think they were earmarked for?
They're looking at some of that for sure too. They're going to tighten the rules on that. So.
Let's see, can you talk about the additional homestead exemption bills that have been proposed and the concerns about this additional exemption?
So there are a number of them. It's the Hometown Hero. It's for police, firefighters, teachers, social workers, all very worthwhile professions. And it's not that it's the unpredictability of what that's going to do for the budgets and what that means in terms of overall for the state and for individual governments, local governments. We're watching those. We're trying to make sure that it's it doesn't happen tomorrow, that there's a glide path so that we have some time to prepare for that, and we can get our budgets in order and establish millage rates that aren't going to all of a sudden be sticker shock. So
right.
trying to work within the framework that they've established on that.
Speaking of the Florida Hometown Hero, there's a housing program that's been proposed. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, there is. So there is. They put aside some money. The budget's certainly not complete yet, but they've set aside substantial dollars for flooding, resiliency, housing. Trying to use some of the. It's interesting. This is so. A lot of money came down from the federal government, the American Rescue Plan Act. The state has. They've got a pretty fat wallet right now. And so they're going to be using some of that money to be spending on some of those programs, housing, resiliency, some other programs, Everglades restoration, et cetera, but those aren't going to be recurring dollars. That's going to be like a 2 or 3 year expenditure. And then we're going to have to figure out whether we're going to continue those programs or whether the state's going to wash their hands of it or not. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Any comments regarding like the infrastructure bill that was passed? That's, dwindling down to the states as far as dissemination, oversight, anything like that, time frame? Do you guys know anything?
Yeah.
About that?
The first tranche of money has gone out to local governments. It's the first time in the history that we've ever seen this type of direct payments to local governments in this type of a magnitude. Volume, dollar volume. And there's a lot of cities that are, so they have until I think 2024, I want to say, that has to be spent. So cities are kind of looking at it holistically, saying a lot of cities are working regionally with their county, saying, all right, well, let's combine our dollars and let's fix this road that's always needed fixing, or let's do stormwater infrastructure, or let's spend it in a way that's mutually beneficial. Others have had citizen groups coming together to figure out how they want to spend it, and allocating it according to that. There's a first tranche that's already cities and counties have already received those dollars, and then there's a second tranche of dollars that will come this year. I think it's July or April, maybe. I can't remember the month. They'll run together. So there'll be more dollars coming down. I will tell you that we're encouraging our cities. We've said time and time again that that cities ought to make sure that they're documenting everything really well, to make sure that if it's kind of like the FEMA de-obligation, when FEMA came back and said, hey, you owe us that money back, that cities can show, hey, this is what we spent it on. This is what the final rule said. And to that point, some of the reasons why cities have been sitting on the money is Treasury just now, about a month ago, finally came out with the final rule. And it's a good thing that some cities waited, because the final rule actually expands some of the uses of some of the dollars. And so the preliminary final rule, which I've never heard of such a thing, a preliminary final, but
see more on.
Yeah. The first to second, third, whatever. But the preliminary final had a much more limited use of those dollars, and they've expanded the use in the final rule. And so some cities they've been smart for sitting back and waiting to see what the Fed, and now that they've done that, they've got more options to use those dollars.
And does that include resiliency and flooding and sea level rise and that sort of thing?
Yes,
correct?
it does. Yes, infrastructure spending, and you had the ARPA bill, and then you had the infrastructure bill. So there's an awful lot of money flowing. Part of that is why we're seeing some inflation right now. I mean, that's just pretty much, most economists will tell you that when you infuse that much cash into the system at once, you're going to see inflation, but that'll probably work itself out over time. So.
Right. Let's all hope so. I keep talking to my financial planner about that. Inflation.
All of us should. Yes.
So this is just a kind of a follow-up to the Hometown Hero housing program, because it's important to note that it would be helping to provide affordable housing for teachers, police, fire, etc. This is so important because we have a lot of those essential workers who can't otherwise afford to live in cities where they work. So.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I just want to make sure that you all understand. I was not suggesting that those were bad programs at all. All I was saying is that we need to make sure that there's some predictability in terms of what that's going to do to budgets, and that we understand sort of what what the real impact, the real world impact is. That's all I was suggesting. I wasn't saying that it was a bad idea in any way, shape, or form.
Right, right. And just one last question. We're at 7:55 and I'd like to kind of stay on time, but do you know anything about this minimum wage that some of the big lobbying groups, like I think it was the Florida Association of Chambers and the Hotel Restaurant Association, it seemed like when I read it, and I could have read it wrong, they were trying to get the state to basically say local businesses could not pay more than minimum wage, or they had to cap it, or do you know anything about that?
Probably about what you know in terms of, I haven't really paid that. I've read a couple of articles about it. They want to do in terms of the implementation, essentially a different wage for like restaurant workers or for others that they wouldn't be doing $15 an hour plus tips, or, trying to figure out, again, the implementation of some of this stuff. The real world bumps up against the hopes and dreams of reality. And so, so just trying to figure out a way to set a glide path for that.
Gotcha. Well, Scott, we really appreciate it as always when you come on as a guest. You're very informative. You give us kind of the insight, the background, and that's what we really, it's really important that we have that in-depth understanding. And obviously everything, the website, Florida League of Cities, is a plethora of all this information. And you can really dig down as deep as you want on your website. And the Local Voices United, it's so important. And I hope that our local officials, our elected officials, as well as our citizens really, are getting involved, are involved in that. As you said, it's really about home rule. It's about meeting our constituents face to face every day, right? In the grocery store, in the ballparks and that sort of thing, and how important it is for us to have that authority to do what is the best for our local citizens.
I just put in the notes. That's what I was just typing as you're talking. Text local voices to 50457. That'll plug you in. It'll lead you to the league's website. We want you all, look, the big thing is that we've been hearing, when I go to citizen groups, I've been all around the state for the last 16 months or so and what I hear is, gosh, we didn't know that was going on up in Tallahassee. And so what we're trying to do is help educate people so that they know there's a bus coming that's going to run them over, instead of having to get up off the ground and say, what was that? And look at the tail of the bus as it's, steaming down the street. So we want you to be more informed and more engaged.
Well, we thank you. Thank you so much, Scott, for everything you do, and for the Florida League of Cities and your team there in Tallahassee. You guys work tirelessly all year long, not just during the session. So
I hope next year I get to come in person, because I love going over there. You know that.
I know,
it's one of my favorite areas of the state. So
we're keeping our fingers crossed, and maybe surf will be up and you can do some surfing, right?
Yes.
All right, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody.
And thank you all for joining us. Again, thank you for participating. And if you would just take a minute to fill out our short meeting survey at the end of the meeting. Again, this has been recorded. It's on our YouTube channel, Beaches Watch 2012. Follow us on Facebook, as well as visit our website. And thank you for joining us. And we look forward to next month's meeting again with our Duvall County Superintendent, Dr. Diana Green, and our representative, Elizabeth Anderson. So have a good evening and a good rest of your week. Thank you.